Welcome to a very special edition of the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe, and I say very special because as we teased last week, we're doing a live podcast of the staff mock draft. We tried this last year, and it wasn't crazy enough, so we figure we'll give it another go. There are, I believe, 8 of us in this podcast right now, so we're going to be getting thoughts from everybody as the draft goes on. The draft actually just kicked off. So with me in this show is going to be Alex Welch, Joey Cardilano, Mike Clay, Pat Thorman, Ross Miles, Scott Spratt, and Tyler Lochner. Never been done before with this many people, so pretty awesome stuff. And guys, we got things kicked off with a bang. Peterson, Bell, Foster, Charles, Gronkowski 5, Julio Jones 6, Eddie Lacy 7. But, you know, I'm going to toss this over to Mike to get things started here. Mike, what are your thoughts on these first 3 picks? Peterson, Bell, Foster. Would you change anything? Is that the way you would have it?
Yeah. And just keep in mind, I mean, I think we have this Google Hangout pretty full, but I think Nate Youngke's trying to get in too. But we're overflowing with people from the staff right now. He can't even get in, so we might see him later. But anyway, yeah, jumping back here, Peterson, Bell, Foster. I mean, that looks like 1, 2, 3 on my board. So you know, we're doing this for the draft guide. The draft guide should be out in the next couple days, and that's going to look familiar. That should be our 1, 2, 3 at the position. I'm happy with it. Peterson. Hey, big volume guy. He's 30. That's the concern there. But obviously, the huge upside. Le'Veon Bell would easily have been your pick there, Jeff, number 1, I assume, had he not been suspended. And of course, Foster. You know, a little bit of a curveball for many, but hey, he outscored. He missed 3 games last year. He still outscored Jamal Charles and Eddie Lacy. I think he's very underrated. People a little too concerned about that injury right now.
Yeah, and you know, obviously issues with all 3 of these guys in some way, shape, or form: age, injury, suspension. Now, with Jamal Charles at number 4, Scott, was this an easy pick for you? It's automatic Jamal Charles every time at number 4? With those guys off the board, that is?
Actually, I was debating between him and Marshawn Lynch, who I don't think is actually gone yet as we're turning to the second round. So I'm very surprised by that. But to me, those 2 were very safe. Oh, he did go? Okay.
Oh, I just took him. I couldn't pass up on Marshawn Lynch at 1.11 at the end of the turn there, or 1.12. Sorry, I thought I had 1.11. So I'm able to go Marshawn Lynch, Des Bryant at the very end of the first round there, going into the second round. I'll definitely take those 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Des Bryant now, what is it, the 5th wide receiver off the board? I'm trying to count through here as
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, number 5. Julio was actually the first one off the board. I'm sure we'll get to Ross on that. But, yeah, I mean, and we've been kind of talking about that in past shows, Jeff and I, about how the sort of the advantage early on of picking late, just because there's so much depth at this first and second, actually just the first tiers at running back and wide receiver. But I'm starting to see some value early in round 3, so you know I think it sort of levels out. Jeff, you and I will see what comes back to us here towards the end of round 2 and into round 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of cringe getting this first pick overall because the wheelhouse. We talked about this on the show this past week. The wheelhouse is really in the middle of the first round. If you're in there, you can stack your team by that 3rd round. So, hoping something will be there for me on that turn at the end of the second into the 3rd round. Another wide receiver goes there, Michael Moore. Michael's not on the show with us, surprisingly enough. He does one of our podcasts with Scott. But A.J. Green, now Jordy Nelson, it's a run on wide receivers. But I want to go back and actually I want to pick Joey's brain here. Joey, 1-5, you go Rob Gronkowski, and I don't think that's outlandish. I was in a mock recently with Mike that was an outlandish mock, but I did take Gronkowski at 1-6. I just want to hear your thoughts on that pick and sort of what was going through your head there as opposed to the other options.
Well, first of all, I'm a shameless New England homer. Second of all, with it being non-PPR, touchdowns mean more. And we all know that Gronk is the best touchdown scorer in the game. Yeah, with Peterson, Bell, Foster, if any 3 of them were there, I probably would have went with them. But I feel comfortable taking Gronk over any of the wide receivers just because of the depth of the respective positions.
Yeah, and you get yourself such an advantage there with Gronkowski. Even if Garoppolo is his quarterback for 4 weeks, it's still a significant advantage over pretty much everybody else at the position. So you can't really fault that. It's just an interesting strategy. I'm curious how your team's ultimately going to work out. Pat takes Jeremy Hill at 2-6.
Love it. Love it.
A favorite here, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with him and Lacey, the touchdown upside's pretty big, and I've been doing a lot of NFL 10s, and the running backs have been just drying right up by early third round, mid third round, the latest. And so I mean, there's definitely a big first tier, like what Mike was saying before. But if you hold off, you're going to be hurting.
Yeah, for sure. It drops off a cliff. The depth at wide receiver is significantly more than running back this year. Although it's an oddly deep year at running back. It is a steep decline from those top guys. Oh, and that no you heard was Mike Evans.
And then Alshon. This is what I was talking about, Jeff. I mean, look at the people still on the board. I'm up right now. Listen, I'm concerned about this guy. He fell off a little bit last year. He faced more nickel. Still saw the yards per carry dropped. He's not going to catch as many footballs, but at 210, Matt Forte, come on, I'll take that every day. I'll take that every single time.
Yeah, I feel like both my spots so far, like picking 106, is you're just stuck in that top 4, top 5 receiver range. I have Julio as my top receiver, so I was happy to take him. But I would have preferred to be like 3 or 4 spots lower and ended up with someone like Brown or Thomas for a little bit, or maybe even Beckham for a little bit better value. And then just there, I was looking at the running backs, and it was Hill, Anderson, Forte, but I had Anderson above Hill, so I was glad Pat went the way he. Forte's crazy value there, but I'm just looking at the upside of that Denver offense and thinking C.D. Anderson's on the up and Matt Forte might be on the down. That's the only reason I've made that pick there.
Yeah, that's not a bad pick. I have no problem going youth there, Hill and Anderson. I don't really. I have Forte ahead of Anderson, Hill, McCoy, Murray on my standard board, my non-PPR board, but I have no problem with that. I mean, I have the old guys. I'm definitely a little concerned having Foster and Forte a running back. Obviously, a chance there for a drop-off, or of course for the missed games. But when those guys are active, that's what am I looking at? 40 points right out of the gate for my 2 running backs. So with wide receiver depth like it is, I'm more than happy with that. But I thought that was interesting, Ross. You went Julio over the likes of Antonio Brown, high floor, high ceiling. Demarius, Dez, Beckham. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. Why you went that direction?
Yeah, I have them all really, really close. Obviously, this is a non-PPR format. It's a standard format, as Jeff would like to call it. So that kind of makes me a bit away from Antonio Brown. And I think you can throw a blanket over those 4. So it's who you like and who you don't like. And I just like Julio's absolute top upside. I know Beckham's kind of got that game as well. When you can score that, and they all do really. It's crazy, these are the kind of guys, 200 yards, 2-3 touchdowns in a game. I just love that, and it can put you over the edge in a week, and that's what it means for me.
Jeff, with Emmanuel Sanders at the start of the 3rd round, do you? I take it you still trust Peyton Manning?
I just don't like my options, honestly. It's like one of the worst spots to be in here. I had to go Mark Ingram, Emmanuel Sanders there. It's not a trust in Peyton Manning per se. It's, obviously early on in the season, I'm happy with an older quarterback. Later in the season, I'm not. But I think that, the volume's still going to be there enough for Sanders to get his. I don't like going into the season with him as my number 1 wide receiver, but the well has dried up thanks to that run. So that's a tough one. It's really a tough one, but what are you going to do in this case? I'm hoping there's going to be some value the next time I come around, but not crazy about this. This run right before me absolutely killed me. And to fill you in for all the folks listening, the run went after Ross's pick of C.J. Anderson, Mike Evans, Alshon Jeffrey, Matt Forte, Randall Cobb, and then I finally get to pick.
Yeah, but before we came on the air, I said I'm going to be frustrated with this draft, and sure enough, I'm looking, and there goes another one. Right now, if you were to look at my board, my top 12 running backs, my top 15 receivers, and top tight end, of course, Gronkowski, are off the board. There's no gaps anywhere. It's exactly the top 12, 15, and 1. But I hear you, Jeff. I mean, there's definitely that top 11 at wide receiver this year, and you really want to try and get one of them guys if you can. I mean, I felt like I couldn't pass on Forte. The only other top 11 receiver on the board right there was Randall Cobb, so I could have went that direction and then come back here. My options would have been Alfred Morris, Carlos Hyde, Frank Gore, Melvin Gordon, Lamar Miller, Andre Ellington. The list goes on and on. Obviously, that's a big step down. Is it worth going from Randall Cobb to who I ended up taking, Kelvin Benjamin? You know, it's really a balancing act. It's definitely a tough call.
It really is, and it just does speak to how well informed everybody is on this staff. Like we said, we've been in a bunch of different mock drafts. People are doing MFL 10s, and usually there's a gap or two. There's a couple weak links, and you can have some players fall to you as a result. There's not a weak link in this crew here, so this is a really tough draft. And if you want to see, ultimately kind of where people should be going in these drafts, our draft guide is going to have that for you. So make sure that you pick that thing up. And just to pimp the draft guide briefly here before we get back to some more picks, we're going to be updating this thing continually throughout the off season. It's not a magazine you buy, you bring to your draft in August, and it was written in May and it's dated. You're going to have access to a PDF file where you can get updates. You're going to be updated right to your draft, and you get that as part of our subscription this year. So make sure you're subscribing to the site. The first quarterback goes off the board at 3-9.
No, 3-5 was Luck.
I missed Luck. All right, Joey's actually here with us. You picked Andrew Luck at 3-5. You're not worried? No late round quarterback for you. You're just going all in with Luck.
Hey, before you jump in, I'm gonna just tell you right now, the cover of our magazine is Aaron Rodgers, and it says why we suggest Rodgers ahead of Luck. So you just made us look.
Well, I'll make an argument for quarterbacks in general there. Anyway. With Evans and Gronkowski in hand, I was looking at running backs, and the top guys left are Gurley, Hyde, and Gordon. Kind of unknowns right now. I guess you can kind of assume a workload with Gordon, but who knows what he's going to get for third down work. And you're just getting guaranteed production with Luck and Rodgers. I was flip-flopping between the two of them, but unfortunately for the cover of the guide, I chose Luck.
All right. Well, Tyler's doing the recap, so you're gonna have to make light of that for the people that are listening to this, Tyler, because we're gonna take a beating for that if we don't make a joke about it.
All right, I will do.
I was happy with
actually
hoping me, Lamar Miller.
I was hoping one of those quarterbacks would fall to me at the end here, but they didn't.
So a few people scoffing at this later round quarterback idea, because Mike, we were talking about how much value there is in this at quarterback, but I mean, I guess there is an advantage to be had if you have one of those two.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about these secondary tiers here after, again, the top 11 running backs, top 11 wide receivers, and Gronkowski. Once you take them off the board, you see, you could certainly carve out some tiers, but really they're close. I mean, if you're really looking at 12 to 24 at running back, and we'll say 12, I mean, you could even make an argument 12 all the way to 37 or so, 38. They're not too far off. So at that point, you look at the gap between Rodgers and Luck and the rest of the quarterbacks, and you could certainly make the case that it's worth snatching up one of them guys at that spot. So I really have no problem with it there.
I don't like this. I don't like my position here.
Yeah, these turns are pretty tough. Both Tyler and I are on the turn, and he just went at 312 Alfred Morris.
See,
I'm okay with that.
I like that pick. I don't know what to do here. This is a tough pick right here. I'm gonna go Jordan Matthews. He's a guy that a lot of people out in fantasy like right now. I would like the pick a little bit more if it was PPR. Obviously, who doesn't like wide receivers more in PPR? But Philadelphia does seem to still have that offense, and Matthews is definitely in line to see a good amount of targets. I know Philadelphia spreads the ball around a lot, but I needed another wide receiver. Like I said, I was hoping one of those quarterbacks would fall to me. Happy to get Morris. I like Jordan Matthews. I was also hoping for Jimmy Graham, who went right before me too.
And, just to touch back on Morris, I mean, Jeff, our last show, I kind of went on a bunch of rants kind of yelling at people, and I was pretty angry a few times. But, here's another one. I mean, what's going on with all this Matt Jones hype? I mean, I've read about him at the Roto World newsfeed. They do a great job, but for some reason, Matt Jones has been in the news every single day for some reason. The guy, of all people, too. I mean, the guy was terrible last year at Florida. I don't get it. I mean, you look at our guys, watched every single game. Our college football focused team watched every single game, and if relative to the other running backs that are coming in this year, he was poor.
Sorry,
as
did we
a
just
runner.
get a timer expired, or did that actually get picked?
No, you got Gurley.
Oh.
Damn it! I was. I got helmet on.
Ross?
All right, so Ross stepping all over everybody's toes and apparently getting beeped out by the internet, but the story.
All right. Anyway, I don't know what happened there, but yeah. Anyway, he rated out poor as a runner, poor as a receiver, poor as a blocker, and he went in the third round. So if I'm looking at Alfred Morris and I see his ADP coming down, which it probably will because of the Jones hype, I'm happy. I think it's a great job to pounce on him. I think his role, if anything, should expand. Just because Jones is not going to be a threat, at least what we saw at the college level. He's going to have to make a very big leap forward as a rookie.
Yeah, Mike, that's why I took him there. Guys like Melvin Gordon and Gurley were still on the board, but like someone just before us said, they're rookies, they're unproven. You kind of know what you're getting with Morris. He's going to get you the yardage. He's going to have touchdown opportunities. He's obviously not going to catch the ball very much, but since this is a standard mock draft, not overly worried about that. So I feel like it's a pretty safe pick to make towards the end of the third round.
That's interesting that Jones graded out poorly in blocking because it seems like that's all anyone talks about with them.
Well, there's a lot of misconceptions, though, by everybody. I mean, the one I see on the defensive side of the ball is that Landon Collins is an in-the-box safety. He only played 30% of his snaps in the box last year. So, we're getting these, I guess it's sort of based on no evidence type forms of analysis that we tend to get very frequently, and I think that's happening with Jones.
I'm just going to throw it out there. I think someone's going to get pretty good value with Keenan Allen sometime soon here.
Somebody who's probably not on the podcast, right? Oh, Melvin Gordon. Nate Yonke takes Melvin Gordon. A little bit of concerns, as we mentioned. Joey, I think that was you mentioned, potential concerns with his work in third down situations. Not noted as a pass catcher, potentially entering the NFL like most running backs with some deficiencies in pass pro. So a little bit of concerns there, but obviously an electric athlete. One thing that I did notice in watching him play a lot, and I don't know if any of you Dynasty guys saw this, but he tends to bounce a lot of plays to the outside, and that's like Bryce Brown-esque. And I don't know if that's going to fly at the pro level.
Yeah, I was concerned with how often he does that, and then he went and ran a 4.52.
Yeah, Jeff, but it's hard to.
Sorry.
Oops. Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah.
Jeff, the situation in San Diego is just so good.
Nope.
Scott, I think you're having a little bit of lag.
He only talks when everyone else is talking.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. You can accept that from a guy who maybe ran like a 4.4 flat, but then he came out and ran a 4.52, and that was a little concerning for me. And his 3 cone was above 7, which is never good for a guy who supposedly has good lateral agility.
Yeah, we'll have to see if he can do anything between the tackles because he keeps getting that the similar body type, of course, to Jamal Charles. But the Jamal Charles comparison, I'm not really sure fits because Charles is a guy who certainly goes outside, but it's after he makes that initial run through the tackles, right? He's an inside to outside runner, and I just hadn't seen that with Gurley at the college level, or not Gurley, I'm sorry, Gordon at the college level. And I'm not saying it can't happen, but I haven't seen it yet, so that would be a concern for me. But probably more from a dynasty standpoint, than the redraft.
Are you guys surprised to see Gordon go ahead of Gurley here?
Right.
Did you pick Joey?
Yeah.
Did Amari Cooper? So the rookies are starting to come off the board, and that's a good question, Tyler. Mike, for example, are you surprised at all to see Gordon go ahead of Gurley?
No, not at all. I mean, when I initially recapped round 1, I had Gurley ahead of Gordon, even if he was going to start slow. But it's looking more and more like, after that point, Fisher came out and said, listen, we're going to take them very slowly, and it kind of looks like he may miss them first 5 weeks before their week 6 bye. So I'm fine with that. I moved Gordon ahead of Gurley. Gurley 22. I have Gordon 16. And in fact, I think you can make a case for Coleman and Yeldon there if they do nail down those number 1 jobs. So I obviously have no problem with Gordon there. It looks like they're going to throw him right in as their feature back, aside of that work on passing downs with Danny Woodhead there, of course.
So Amari Cooper off the board, and then Mike goes and steals tremendous value there at 410 with Frank Gore. Really love that pick. And this, just everybody who's listening, keep him on your short board. It's not, you're not going to get oohs and ahs when you walk up to the board and put Frank Gore's name up there, but it's tremendous value. It's a great pick right in that range, and that's where I consistently see him going.
Yeah, I wish Scott was here, though, to argue the guy he took before Gore, who is on my – I have 2 guys that absolutely should not be drafted this year, Dwayne Allen and Gio Bernard. At their ADPs are just way, way off the chart. So I have to I'm gonna have to have this one out with Scott, I think, after the draft.
Well, Mike, you don't
unless someone else wants to defend Gio. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Mike, you don't think Dwayne Allen's going to catch a touchdown every 3 passes or whatever again this year?
Yeah, and Des Bryant's going to catch 16 too.
Yeah. Jeff goes with T.J. Yeldon. You were just talking about him there.
Sorry, you just grabbed Kevin White to annoy Mike, didn't you? That was a Mike baiting move. You want more rags on this podcast.
Yeah, I like the Yeldon White. Yeah, I think Jeff and I are higher than the field on them. I've been getting Yeldon in pretty much every draft as my number 3 running back, my flex and standard. Sometimes I'm happy with him as my 2. It's an offense that's going to score more points, and he's clearly going to be their feature back. So I like that a lot. And Kevin White, I've said this before. I don't think it's crazy to think in the second half of the season he starts to push Jeffrey, if not take over, as their number one receiver. Jeffrey was not a first-round pick. White was the 7th overall pick. By common logic, White should be the better prospect. So at some point he should emerge there, as good as Jeffrey's been. So either way, he's in great position. So I love those picks by Jeff, even though it's always risky going rookies this early. But I think that those are 2 very talented players in good situations.
Yeah, I agree. It's also early going rookies, but I obviously was the guy that picked Gurley. But for me, I thought it was a strong pick. I was looking at the running back left, and it was my 3rd running back. It gave one in consideration, as I'm hinting at. He's going to be another great player this year. They were the 1 and 2 backs on my board at that point. So I went with a Rams pick, obviously, since I'm putting my hat on.
Oh. Yeah. I'm trying to help Nate get in. I'm trying to help Nate get in the draft here. I'm not paying attention. Hold on. Go ahead, Tyler. I'm picking now. I promise.
I was going to say the bottom of our thing here says 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, but our league bylaws say there's a flex there, right? We can start 3 running backs.
That's correct.
There is a flex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all the folks listening, 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 1 flex, 1 tight end, obviously. A kicker, team defense, and, of course, a quarterback.
I'm going to take a kicker round 5.
There you go.
You're fired.
Someone took, in a league I was in, someone took Steven Gostkowski in the 6th round, and they still made it to the league championship.
Oh, my God.
They picked up Odell Beckham Jr. though, so that explains it.
Yeah, he won me a few leagues last year where I picked Peterson in the top 5. So I hear that.
So getting caught back up with this the draft here, we're still seeing some good wide receiver value going off the board. A Mike Clay favorite, Vincent Jackson. Mike picks at 5'3". Scott Spratt, who's no longer in the podcast, goes Brandon Marshall. And I like both of those picks. Again, not super sexy picks, but these are guys who are going to put points on the board, I mean, just for the sake of sheer volume.
Daniel Ross.
Nice pick, Ross.
And Ross picks Travis Kelce at 5'6".
I was about to take him.
It's a very thin tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Olsen or Kelsey there as the third tight end, but I think Graham is not far ahead of them, so I think that's great value when you look at, obviously, Sean knows his stuff, but he went Jimmy Graham at 311. To me, he's so close to those two that, I think that's great value when you consider where a guy like Graham went in the draft. So yeah, I'm fine with him in round 5.
Well, I put together a list of, I think, 56 players because that's the 52nd pick in the draft, and I've only got 6 players left on my list. So I mean, we were talking about testament about how this top of the draft is quite similar. It's really these first 5-6 rounds you can definitely nail in a certain group of talent.
All right, Pat. Do you have enough Allen Robinson shares you could trade him to me in the PFF league?
I have a couple of shares of Allen Robinson in around my dynasty leagues. I absolutely love him. He was really ripping last year before he got hurt, and you got to imagine Bortles is going to take a little bit of a step forward. He'll have a little bit more of a running game. I mean, he was getting targeted, he was getting peppered right before he did get hurt. So his touchdown upside might be a little bit capped just because their offense in general, but I mean, he's far and away their number one.
Yeah, and Julius Thomas there. I'll be busy when they're at the goal line. But, we were worried early in the offseason maybe Justin Blackmon comes back, and we know he's been heavily targeted, when he's active for Jacksonville. It's obviously a bit of a new regime now since he's really, been busy in that offense. But looks like he's very unlikely to play this year. So that just makes Robinson look better. And I think that makes Marquise Lee, who we'll probably see come off the board later, I think he's a little underrated right now. Maybe even going deeper, Allen Hurns, could be a bit of a sleeper in deeper leagues too. So that's really interesting. And just to touch on this, I was going to mention a guy I was keeping an eye on, and that's Andre Ellington. I think that he's a bit underrated right now. I mean, they're talking about David Johnson as more of an H-back than a tailback. I mean, he has really no competition. If Ellington's healthy, it's going to be exactly what we saw last year. He's going to be heavily used in the running game for better or worse, and he's obviously going to see a ton of targets as well. So I think he's probably going to be a value in the 5th round. I think that's a great pick there by Kyle.
To go back to this Jacksonville thing, too, you mentioned Allen Hurns. I mean, let's not forget these guys took 2 more wide receivers in this draft. And while Rashad Green is not anything necessarily special, I mean, he was Jameis Winston's primary target last year. And the guy knows how to play the position. I mean, he's not a super freak athlete, but he knows how to run a pattern or two, and I could see him working his way onto the field, not in a fantasy sense, but potentially being a viable part of that offense this year, another weapon for Bortles.
Well, keep in mind, Jameis Winston was terrific 2 years ago with Kelvin Benjamin, the 6'5", 230, 40-pound Kelvin Benjamin last year. Green was his top receiver, and he was pretty bad. I mean, Winston had a bad year, so that could say something about Green, but, we'll see. Good pick, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks. Has Andre Johnson been taken
Yeah, nice
yet?
pick, Tyler. Nice pick.
He's there.
No, Andre's still on the board, and Edelman
Got him there.
Yeah, they were both from top of my board.
Yeah, pretty good picks there. I'm probably a little bit I have a couple guys still ahead of Johnson, but Edelman, I mean, he's still in that tier 2, even with Brady suspended 4 games. That's even in standard. That's a great pick. I mean, you look at where he finished last year, even in standard, it doesn't jump off the board, but you have to remember he missed 2 games and a little bit more than that too, so a little more of that 3rd game. So that's a pretty good get there.
Yeah. Also, with Garoppolo, you watched the few snaps he did take last season. He played the whole second half of the Buffalo game, and then obviously the 4th quarter of the Kansas City game. He was thrown to Edelman at pretty much the same rate Brady was. So even for those first 4 games, doesn't scare me too much. And then the reason I took Andre Johnson at 6'1", I thought that was a 6th round good place to take him. I just really, you gotta like Andrew Luck's offense. It's pretty easy to see him throwing over 40 touchdowns. Andre Johnson in Houston, the lack of touchdown production was what really held him back. I feel like we could see his touchdown rate increase a little bit in Indianapolis just simply being with Andrew Luck.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little worried about all their targets there. I think if they spread it around, and at times you saw Reggie Wayne disappear last year too. But they're high ceiling, but I think there's a low floor there as well. But But hey, we got Nate in. We got him working. So Nate, you know what? I'm looking at your team here, and it occurs to me that you watched a lot of college football last year, and that shows up in your roster. We see your two top tailbacks are Tevin Coleman, Melvin Gordon, and I guess you went kind of wide receiver or heavy early with Antonio Brown and Jordy Nelson. You also have Aaron Rodgers, but you took Amari Cooper as well. So I'm curious what you're thinking with those three.
Yeah, with Melvin Gordon, I watched all of the Wisconsin games last year. That was one of the college games I watched. And he was making players miss tackles left and right. I know he had a great offensive line in front of him. But as long as he can get that little bit of a hole, he can make guys miss all the time. I know his speed isn't the greatest, but I think that elusiveness is going to mean lots of carries, lots of yards, and be successful even though I took wide receivers early. I think he can be up there in the high running back 2 range.
Interesting. You know what? Actually, while you say that, kind of reminds me of something. Melvin Gordon obviously was off the charts last year. Obviously, the CFF team liked him a lot. Another guy that is liked a lot, an early to mid-round pick in the draft, was Tyler Lockett. Obviously, he hasn't been picked yet, but he will at some point, I imagine. He goes to Seattle. I'm wondering how you think he transitions to the NFL.
Yeah, I think he'll do well. Just worried, at least this year, about his playing time. But watching him in college, typically you'll see wide receivers in college who are really good at 1 or 2 specific routes. You'll see some players who are deep threats who saw almost all of the receiving yards on deep passes. But he was someone that did really well on a number of different routes. So I think because he's so well at so many different things, that should translate well once he's able to see the field.
Good stuff. Hard not to like Lockett. He was terrific last year.
I think we lost.
Who'd we lose?
We might have lost me.
I think everybody's lost right about now.
Yeah, we're all lost because I'm up and I didn't even know it, so I'm lost too.
I think I've got Michael Floyd last pick. That was good value for me. I have him a lot higher than most people. A lot higher enough that Mike even tried to make me put a trade for him, trying to abuse the fact I'm too high on him, Mike.
Yeah, well, hey, how else do you maximize your team? Sell high, buy low.
No, but it was. I mean, that's the kind of thing. Like Mike really pushed me on a trade in our staff league, and I didn't go through with it. And he had every right to be annoyed at the time because my rankings had him really close. But it made me revisit my rankings because it made me realize that I was not comfortable in making a trade that made sense on paper if you believed in my rankings. So, it's just one of those things. And Floyd was one of the players questioned, but the player I preferred in that instance was Keenan Allen.
Alex, I was hoping I'm picking at 6'10" here, and I took Decker over LaFell, thinking I could get LaFell when he came back around. Alex stole him with the very next pick. Good one. LaFell very undervalued.
Yeah, I mean, I think his role is pretty locked in now. I was really surprised, with the way he played last year, but I came away pretty impressed, so I'm kind of glad to get him in this range.
Two values that in New England, Edelman fell further than he should have. LaFell late and almost made it to round 7. I like it.
When I picked Kelsey, it was a choice between Edelman, Andre Johnson, and Kelsey. It was really close. I just went with the tight end.
I think your Kelsey pick was a great pick because you had a few people lining up behind you to take him if you didn't take him there.
One pick later.
Yeah.
I mean, I've basically avoided. I mean, I went wide receiver, Julio Jones, which is somewhat controversial as the first receiver off the board, but then I've just gone running back, and then tight end. So I'm now scrambling for receivers a little bit, but we've all talked about how much depth there is at the position. So
yeah, it thins out very quickly in this draft. I was just going through that dilemma myself, and I mean, it's one of those where I just kind of had to trust my rankings, and I went with Larry Fitzgerald at 7-1. I probably, maybe a little early on him by ADP standards, but it's sort of one of those where you compare and contrast the unknowns a little bit with the commodity who maybe obviously is on the wrong side of 30, but with Carson Palmer back in there, decent as my fourth receiver? Third receiver.
I had him top 5, 6 left on the board. Obviously, I believe in the Arizona offense as well, taking Floyd as the last pick I made, so I don't mind that pick, Jeff, at all.
All right, Alex.
believe he was a wide receiver too last year when Palmer played Fitzgerald.
Yeah, John Brown was up there too. It's funny, Fitzgerald and Brown dropped a lot when Palmer went out. Michael Floyd actually got better, caught some long passes and did better. But it's kind of funny how that worked out. Alex, I got to put the spotlight on you here. Let's talk a little about Charles Johnson, another guy I don't like too much. I think early 7th round, that's way too much for me. I have him actually 57 at wide receiver, so there's probably about maybe 20 receivers I'd prefer there. So I'm curious what you're thinking there.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen his rankings. He's a pretty polarizing player right now, it seems like. But I'm just excited to see when they get Peterson back in the lineup to see how that opens things up. I like his role, in Norv Turner's offense. I guess I'm just higher on him than a lot of other people are, but I think the upside is there. So maybe it's not really a safe pick there, but I think it could pay off.
Yeah, I mean, if you believe in his talent, that's certainly true. I mean, my concern is he was wide receiver 38 or something, even after he got rolling last year. I think Jarius Wright and Greg Jennings had more points after his one good week that he had, and he's never had a top 15 week among fantasy receivers in his career. Obviously, it's a small sample, but even although there's all that hype, he hasn't done it. So that's my main concern there. But hey, if you believe in his talent,
Yeah, I mean, it's more of a leap of faith there with him, but I definitely see the concern.
Talking about leap of faith.
Well, I want to jump in. All right. So here, Nate Yankee, you go 7-9. You go with Joseph Randall. You got to tell us a little bit about this pick.
The Cowboys have the best run-blocking offensive line in the league. I trust Randall's going to be the one to get the carries. I don't trust any of their other running backs on the roster at all. So Randall, on the small sample size he was in, he did really well. So put that with more carries, put that behind the best run-blocking offensive line in the league, and that's got to produce.
Joe Randall led the NFL in yards per carry last year, so they're saying there's something to be said for him. Or at least that line. How about, a guy I was kind of looking for. My team's kind of old, so I was kind of hoping for some older guys, or younger guys a little bit later. And one of those guys was, I was hoping Rashad Perriman would drop a little bit, but Joey jumped on him there with the 5th pick in the 7th round. I thought that was a pretty interesting get there. I'm having a hard time getting him into my top 40. Just because there's risk there. I think there's bust potential, but at the same time, you look at that offense, their tight end position, they don't have many good receivers. If Pitta doesn't play, you can't expect much from Max Williams out of the gate. Obviously, Trestman likes to throw to the running back, so we see a little boost there. But Steve Smith's 36. I mean, if he goes down at some point or really drops off, Perriman's in position to see a massive target workload as a rookie in a decent offense. So that's a really interesting pick. I have no problem with Joey taking him there in the 7th round.
Yeah, I'm not in love with him long term, but the opportunity's there, like you said, so that's pretty much it.
I kind of hate my picks here at this turn, but I'm doing them anyway.
Matt Stafford. Stafford at 7-10. Go ahead, Ty.
Well, I just took 2 running backs that might not even be getting any snaps for their teams by week 8, but I'm hoping at least one of them hits. I really wanted Cam Newton there. Sean kind of took him, so I took the last 2 guys that were left on my board. I know Nate just took Joseph Randall from Dallas. I just took Darren McFadden. Really just the same reason why I quote-unquote like McFadden. I don't think anybody really genuinely likes McFadden, but you like the line that he's running behind. That's that pick right there. I'm drafting Dallas's offensive line, not so much Darren McFadden.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sankey's interesting. I know Sean's been talking about him a little bit. You can read more about Sean liking Sankey and why he does in the draft guide. He did a feature. It's going to be around page 12 or so in the guide. That's pretty good. Explains why Sankey, maybe we're throwing in the towel too early on him. He convinced me a little bit. I'll tell you what. I was kind of getting on the David Cobb bandwagon. I still am. I'm not. By no means am I on the Bishop Sankey bandwagon. He didn't really jump off the tape last year, but there is still some hope there. He was good after contact. And, again, Sean talks a lot about that in the guide, so a good opportunity there to explain why you should buy the draft guide.
Yet another reason.
I got sniped again on Roddy White.
There's Parker too. That's a good pick there. And round 8, that was my target. Good one there by Nate. Team rookie over there.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm curious. Now we're doing this obviously in May. I'm curious if there's any post-draft haze that's impacting us because a lot of rookies going early. And if this changes, because we're going to do this back again in June, we're going to do another one in July, and if I'm correct, we'll do another one in August. So we'll just keep doing these over the off season, and it'll be interesting to see if some of that haze fades as we get into the doldrums of the summer, and then especially back again into camp.
Great pick, Pat.
So another rookie goes as I'm talking. Nelson Aguilar to Pat at 8'6".
Russ, I'll trade him for Kelsey if you want.
No, you're forcing me into making an ugly pick. I hate doing this. I've got a handcuff Gurley now. I was hoping Aguilar was there so I didn't have to do it. I hate you, Pat.
Is it just me, or does it sound like we're drafting with Ricky Gervais? So another rookie goes Jay Ajayi, and that's another interesting situation. Ajayi, very talented, but the injury concerns caused him to slip really all the way to day 3. And then Mike Snipes, my guy, Amir Abdullah, I had him queued up. So yet again, my team is going down the tubes. But both Ajayi and Abdullah, very interesting players. Ajayi, if he gets the shot, he could be a 3-down guy. I don't know if we could say that about Abdullah, but he's going to be, really intriguing in that Reggie Bush role.
Yeah, definitely. I think he'll be busy on passing downs right out of the gate, like you said, and by the second half, maybe even takes over that role. I kind of like it too. All right, who's that going? Tyler.
I don't think it's me. I got headphones in.
Oh yeah, you do. Yeah, I kind of think back to Cincinnati 2 years ago when Bernard came in, but Jarvis Green Ellis was the underwhelming early down back. Anybody hear me? Who is it?
Not me.
Somebody's fired.
Nothing better than a podcast just completely grinding to a halt right here. But the echo seems to be going on my side, so
Testing. All right, I'm good now.
No, it's you.
No, I'm not.
You're fired. You're fired.
I'm not editing any of this out, folks, so I hope you're enjoying listening to this wonderful portion of the podcast here.
Jeff, you're on the clock, by the way.
I'm looking.
It just gave you Devontae Adams.
Okay, whatever. I was going to pick a running back here, and it's probably a little early to do so, but I'm going to do it anyway just to sort of stand by my guy, and that's Duke Johnson. There's a lot of debate here because of the situation, but we go back to that talent issue. Mike, we've talked about this on the show before. He's the most talented guy there, and I do believe that thoroughly, and I think the cream is going to rise in this situation. And, that's why I'm throwing my support behind Johnson every opportunity I get.
I like that pick. I mean, he's literally the most explosive guy on that entire team. And it's going to take him about 2 weeks to figure that out in camp. So they're going to have to get him on the field in some capacity, even if Corral's on the field at the same time. I mean, he's more explosive than the wide receivers, more explosive than the tight ends, although, everyone's, team Hausler. But, I mean, they're going to really have to feed him the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how the carry distribution breaks down. But I think that obviously, he's a more dynamic player than West is, and he offers a little bit more, versatility than Crowell. So it's a really intriguing player for me. And at this point, too, I'm fairly confident in throwing some darts at some younger players. One of the things that I've said, and this is maybe the dynasty mentality coming out, but I like younger players. Younger players tend to play better in December, and that's when you win fantasy championships.
I was going to take Charles Sims, so
Yeah, me too.
Digging deep here now. Speaking of young players throwing a dart there, I'm going to go with Ertz.
Ertz so good. We're still getting an echo. If anybody's not using headphones on the podcast, then that might be why we're getting an echo here. So
Fair enough.
It only seems to be me getting the echo, though. Of course.
I'm definitely getting echo.
I usually don't have a problem with it.
All right, I can hear it.
I think it sounds good now.
Well, if it sounds good now, then we're good to go.
Right as Nile Davis goes.
All right, probably a good time here right in the middle of the 9th round. I want to talk a little bit about the guide in general, how you can get it. New, first time we've ever done this. If you sign up for PFF Fantasy Gold, and there's a lot of ways to do that at a great deal, the guide is free. So, and again, the PDF, I should be clear, the PDF is free. And it is updated. It's free every time we update it. You can download the new version. So make sure you sign up for Fantasy Goal on the site, $29.99 for the year. That's why it's a little bit more than last year, because the guide is included. You can also sign up through DraftKings. Use the link on our site. You get Fantasy Gold for free. All you have to do is make a deposit of at least $10. They'll also double your deposit over there at DraftKings. You can also sign up through RotoPass. Great deal with our buddy Matthew Berry over there. Check out rotopass.com. You can get a bunch of different website packages for a low price of $60, and you can also buy the guide individually for $4.99 on the site, or you can buy the print version at CreateSpace or Amazon. That'll be available in a few days, and they'll mail you a print copy of the guide. It looks pretty. Aaron Rodgers and Le'Veon Bell on the cover this year. It looks fantastic. Our buddy Eric Mills threw the cover together for us. So. I recommend buying it. What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
Buy it.
I'm for it.
Do it.
It's $4.99. Buy it.
Is that dollars or pounds?
What do they call it? Quid?
Yeah, quit.
I liked. I had Victor Cruz and Anquan Bolden were the top 2 guys on my board right there, and then they just went back to back right in the middle of the 9th round. I like those picks.
Tannehill, he got paid today. He's going to be content this year, Nate. He's not going to do too well.
Who's going to tear his ACL?
Oh, God, don't say that.
Carson Palmer. All right,
yeah.
So we're into the 9th round, almost the end of the 9th round here. We're into the thick of things. No kickers so far, so good. Recapping the last couple picks, though, Victor Cruz, Anquan Bolden, as was said. Chris Ivory goes, and then Ryan Tannehill there. Tannehill's really interesting. Nate, I'd like to hear your thoughts on Tannehill.
We graded him out pretty well last year, and now he's getting a much better receiving core than he had last year. Jordan Cameron at tight end, complete makeover at wide receiver. Plus getting Landry back for his 2nd year. The offensive line can only get better from here. It can't get much worse than what it was, so I think a completely improved offense should really help Tannehill out.
I would like to thank you guys for taking people like Chris Ivory ahead of Tom Brady.
Oh, no. I was going to pick the bad boy.
Allegedly.
And here's another situation where it'll be interesting to see how it works out, because obviously as we sit right now, he's got a 4-game suspension. Who knows if that's overturned or not, or if it's reduced. So if you're doing these drafts right now, Pat, I think this is something that you came across in an NFL 10 with a really good value on Brady as well.
Yeah, I got him in the 11th, and you can't pass that up. And you can even saw it with LaFell in MFL 10s. His ADP is going back down. He was picked pretty early in this because, obviously we're a little more clued in than, I guess, the average MFL 10 drafter. But it's creating bargains, and chances are the suspension is going to get reduced, if not completely overturned. We don't want to get into the fact that the Patriots are getting railroaded here, but all indications are that it's going to at least get reduced. They're talking tonight that they might work something out in back channels. I saw that come across Twitter. So it's created a little bit of a value bubble.
Yeah, I mean, Mike has I think Mike pointed this out. He banged this drum a few times on Twitter. But if you take Brady in the 9th, 10th, 11th round, and then you scoop up, even if you pick Jimmy Garoppolo for the first 4 games or any other quarterback that goes very late in the draft, you create a lot of value with the quarterback there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends how good you think he's going to be. I mean, you figure last year he finished behind Ryan Tannehill. He was number 9. He was very inconsistent. There's a lot to be excited about, especially because of how he did. In the playoffs, he was outstanding, but he was definitely inconsistent last year. But if you think he's going to be a borderline top 5 fantasy quarterback, he's still worth taking. You got a great value where you got him there. Like you just said, find a replacement level quarterback for 4 weeks. Maybe you won't even have to again if it gets overturned. But either way, again, you think he's a high end tight quarterback one, you really shouldn't move his needle too much in terms of where he is on your draft board.
It does bring up an interesting question of.
Sorry, carry on, Tyler.
I was just saying, it does bring up an interesting question of where do you draft guys that have some question marks during the summer. For example, Jerick McKinnon, what's the deal with Adrian Peterson? Peterson was the first guy that went off our board, right? I mean, so guys that have question marks around them, it's interesting in these early drafts to look back at them and see how much they've moved.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to chip in and say that Brady was the 11th quarterback taken, so I'm the only guy now without a quarterback, so I was just double-check that before I made my pick, because it doesn't seem such a pressing need, because you'd have to assume with short rosters like we do, you're, Tyler, probably going to be the only one backing up.
I did pick 2 quarterbacks already, so if there are only 11 taken, there could be someone else with that one.
Gotcha. Sorry, that means there is 12.
Andre Williams going in the 10th round. I think that's maybe a little bit closer to his actual value, Mike.
Yeah, we've seen some weird ones, and they're going to end up in magazines too. Shockingly, you're going to see some really bizarre picks in some of the rival magazines. So, you could, and hey, we have lots of friends in these magazines, but you can pay $7.99 for those. And just get the one-time magazine. I think you can't get them until June or July, or you could get ours for $4.99 and get updates all the way through late August. So, I'm biased, but I think this is the way to go.
I'm not saying who's better, but it's us. Real quick too, while we're in the thick of things here, we just hit the 11th round. I want to pause briefly and give a little mention from our sponsors here, guys. It's baseball season.
What?
I can't even say this with a straight face talking about baseball, but fantasy baseball, though, of course, we can talk about with a straight face. And, it's baseball season, and huge cash prizes are being won every single day at DraftKings.com, the official daily fantasy sports partner of Major League Baseball. Daily fantasy, guys, no season-long commitments. It's the worst part about fantasy baseball. The end of the season is fantasy football draft season. You don't want to be playing fantasy baseball at that time of the year. One-day leagues, it's a new season every time you play. You're never stuck with injured players. You don't have to work the waiver wire, poor performances. It's simple. In baseball, you pick 2 pitchers, 8 positional players, stay under the cap, you can win huge cash prizes. Last season, our buddy Peter Jennings won $1 million playing fantasy baseball at DraftKings.com. Hundreds of thousands of fantasy sports fans just like you cashed in at DraftKings. Now it's your turn. Hurry up to DraftKings.com now. Use the promo code PFF to play for free to win part of a $300 million in cash being paid out. I want to have that on my bed so I can roll around in it this season, baseball season. DraftKings.com, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Use the promo code PFF for a free entry now at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com. Back to the draft.
What's that site again?
DraftKings.com. A couple more rookie running backs that came off the board. 2 guys that we actually talked about earlier. I went with David Cobb at 11-1. I think he's the best running back on that team. Sorry, Sean. But I love the value there. And then David Johnson. Mike, you mentioned a little bit about him earlier, being an H-back potentially. So, how has that impacted your projections for Johnson this season?
Yeah, I mean, I still have him sort of where he went. I mean, I'm okay with him at this spot just because Ellington, he's not only did he get hurt last year, he struggled with health, or he struggled with health. He struggled with efficiency. He just was not very good. He was very good as a rookie because he was in a situational role where he was running against nickel and dime defenses, and he took advantage. He caught a lot of passes. Last year, he caught even more passes, but he was also asked to run the ball against base defenses, and he did not do well. So that being said, if he struggles, if he goes down, Johnson's next in line. I mean, it's Kerwin Williams behind him as the next viable threat there, Stephen Taylor. So, I think he's okay to kind of take that number one job if he goes down. But, I think he's not going to have anything close to standalone value. It just sounds like he's going to catch some passes, get some carries, very much like a Marcel Reese. You would never want to start Marcel Reese, but he's still one of the better handcuffs at the position.
All right, back to the action here. 11-7, Josh Hill goes. Jerick McKinnon goes 11-8. 11-9, Ruben Randall. I really like the Josh Hill. I think it's an interesting topic right now. Obviously, we saw the potential with Jimmy Graham in that offense in New Orleans. Josh Hill, not Jimmy Graham, but there's potential in that offense, right, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, it's still kind of an unknown, but at this point, I didn't have a tight end, and my rankings kind of leveled out. So there's a gaggle of guys there that I see all similarly. So I didn't want to miss out on Hill because he seems to have the most upside left of any of the tight ends, and I'll probably backfill it with one of those other guys later on to kind of insure him. But like I said, he's got quite a bit of upside depending on how they use him. Sean Payton certainly sounded pretty enamored with him when he was describing him to the media, and we saw what he can do around the red zone last year. So. And they're bereft of targets, really. I know they want to go run heavy, and that's probably what they're going to do by all indications. But there isn't a whole heck of a lot of other players to throw the ball to, especially compared to years past.
Yeah, tight end. Yeah, tight end is just it's so weird. Wherever you want to cut off the tier, I mean, you can argue that 8th and 9th is almost the same as 24th and 25th. I mean, they all have question marks. They all have upside for the most part, or in some cases, there's a couple safe guys in there like Walker and Donnell that they're going to be safe tight end twos. Maybe you don't have that tight end one upside, but either way, that tier is so deep that you could still be waiting at tight end and come out with a guy you can be excited about. And with one of your last couple picks, it's just a crazy deep tier after those. What do you want to say? Gronk is one, then Graham, Olsen, Kelsey, Bennett. Then who do you really get overly excited about? They're all very similar.
Yeah, and Bennett kind of with the way things have been going with his relationship with the team right now, he's kind of an unknown. So I mean, he might not even be on that tier with Kelsey and Olsen, at least till we find out some more information.
Moncrief.
Yeah, Sean seems to be sticking to his contrarian mentality here, picking a lot of players that maybe people are down on or maybe not necessarily believing in. He just went with Eli Manning as his second quarterback in the end of the second round, or the 11th round. Not that people are down on him per se, but he seems to be a player who, he is falling to these rounds here. But it's an interesting pick for him because he does have Odell Beckham. So he's got that little bit of a stack going on in his roster. But I'm looking through his roster here, and he has taken, Torrey Smith, potentially, one of those players that people are down on in San Francisco this year. Dante Moncrief with the addition of Philip Dorsett. I mean, some interesting picks. Maybe I'm the only one who's interested in them.
So I'm just looking through for some sleepers right now. I'm trying to piece together the end of this roster because this is where you win and lose fantasy leagues right now. This is where value is going to be found, right?
This is where Odell Beckham and Mike Evans. Well, I guess Mike Evans went earlier, but this is where Odell Beckham went last year. So yes, if you had him, you won your league last year.
I get the feeling a lot of people picked him up after the guy who drafted him dropped him 2 weeks into the season.
There you go, Ross.
He wasn't actually at the top of my board. I was considering him, but I'll do this instead. It's fine.
I'm still trying to get you back for Kelsey.
To those listening, painting a picture here, we had Sam Bradford go in the middle of the 12th round. Ross, Rams fan #1 over there, now becoming an Eagles fan because Sam Bradford, the chosen one, is in Philadelphia. And this is interesting. I mean, close to home for me and Mike, and obviously a high ceiling. Big question mark, but a high ceiling in that offense, considering what we saw even Mark Sanchez do.
Yeah, I have some concern. I don't know. What was Mark Sanchez? Number 9, I think, when he was the starter last year in fantasy. I think Sam's probably a little bit lower than that, just because I think you're going to see them run more like they did Chip's first season. And I don't think you're going to see as many 50-50 balls like what Nick Foles did earlier in his career. I think you're going to see some more conservative throws, maybe not as many plays run every week, not as many big plays. So that concerns me a tiny bit. I still like him. I think he's a decent 2 option. He's fine in the 12th round, obviously, because of the offense, he has a high ceiling. But I think that had Foles been there or Sanchez, I might be a little bit higher on the Eagles quarterback, just because they're worse quarterbacks, but they're better fantasy quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of quarterbacks, I could not. I usually don't take 2 quarterbacks, especially since I took Breeze. I wasn't too excited about taking him, but I can't let Teddy Bridgewater pass. I think he has outstanding breakout potential.
That's really frustrating because obviously I was the last guy to pick a quarterback, and Bradford and Bridgewater were clearly sitting there. You're thinking in a 12-team league you're going to have a good shot at getting 13, 14, 15, but not today it seems, you Sharks.
The frustration set in.
Josh Robinson off the board in the 12th.
Yeah, I like the
that was a surprise pick there, but I do like that pick a lot, Joey.
I'm thin at running back, so I got to swing for the fences a little. Gore's old. Who knows?
Did you take Gore, Joey?
No.
Yeah, I mean, Robinson is kind of a must handcuff for me, anytime I would grab Gore.
Yeah, definitely.
Part of me now wants to draft Jimmy Garoppolo and pray that Brady's suspension is increased to 16 games for indiscretions against the game.
Like Marshall Falk over there, Ross. Conspiracies.
There you go. Devin Funchess going in the 13th round. I was actually debating between him and Coates, and I went with what I thought might be the better offensive situation, though Funchess could see more targets, maybe a higher floor. So it's an interesting pick, Mike.
Yeah, he's still pretty young, but at this spot he's so big, and he's obviously going to be their number 2. I think he pretty much has to be. I don't think Jericho Cotchery is really much of a threat there. I also have Kelvin Benjamin, so he kind of works as a handcuff too. But I guess I'm sort of hoping for what we saw in Tampa last year. Maybe with the touchdowns leveled out a little bit between Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans. Maybe you'll see a similar kind of setup with Funchess and Benjamin there in Carolina this year.
Yeah, he's just surrounded by these big weapons, almost impossible to throw over their heads.
Wow, Ross, you took a guy that's going to get cut.
I like his talent.
He's huge. He's huge. That's all he has going for him.
I'm just saying, we're picking round 13, 16 of 16. These are my last 2 picks, right? So the other one's a quarterback, and then kicker and defense.
And just to get rid of the mystery for the listeners, it's Deron Carter we're talking about.
I'm sorry. I mean, I'm looking at my board, and I'm looking at the people I'm considering. Cordero Patterson. I think that guy's a head case. I mean, obviously Deron Carter is as well, but I've already invested in Pitson in different leagues. Marquise Wilson. I think if Chicago really liked him, they wouldn't have paid all that stuff for Kevin White. So I'm just looking at the receivers available. Justin Hunter, again, not a fan. I maybe could have gone with a rookie like Devin Smith. I wouldn't have fancied Crabtree. So I don't know. Talent-wise, I like Carter. We've talked about the Indy offense. It's a dice roll with one of my last picks.
I would have went Dorsett there. I mean, if you're looking at Dorsett against Deron Carter, why not go Dorsett there?
Because I don't know. I'm not a big Hilton fan, but it feels to me that's more like a bargaining chip against Hilton with his contract over the next couple of years. And like I said, they're the same kind of receiver. Those guys can be interchangeable. I think Hilton stays on the field. Carter can earn his own individual role in that offense.
Well, see, here's another one of these. Wait. Here's one of these narratives again that I don't agree with. I don't think they're the same player at all. I think Dorsett is maybe in the Deshaun Jackson mold, but that's not Hilton's game per se.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Hilton move into a possession role once Wayne's role dropped last year. Hilton took that role. He was the possession guy, and he can definitely do that as well. I mean, and you bring in I'm drawing a blank on his name, of course. Yeah, Dorsett, right. You bring Dorsett in there and you send him deep and let Hilton run the underneath route. I mean, you put the second tight end out there, Andre Johnson, whatever you want to do. But I don't agree with that either. I think it's ridiculous to say that a first-round pick is leverage against another player who, I don't know that they've been discussing and he's asking for too much money, or that he would be a tremendous loss if they lost him. So I don't agree with that. I know it's been kind of reported that way. It sort of makes sense in a way, but I think it's kind of a silly concept.
Ryan Gregson has done other things, though.
Yeah, well, it's not Marcus Smith in the first round, but that's an Eagles joke. Anyway, I don't think you use your first round pick as a bargaining chip in any way, shape, or form. They loved the guy. They said he was the top on his boards or on their boards, so they went with him. They trusted their board, and they didn't draft necessarily for need. So you have to look at it that way. But it is really intriguing that after they sign Carter and then they go and do that. So it doesn't bode positively for Carter.
Nate, what do you think about Dorsett? You think he has a future?
I think he was drafted too high there to the Colts. I thought of him more as a third-round pick, but I also agree. I don't think you pick someone in the first round just as a bargaining tool for another one of your players. I think you draft someone in the first round since you think he'll contribute to the team, but I don't know if that'll happen this year or not, so I'm not sure I'd be picking him in a redraft like this. But Dynasty, I definitely look at him.
Yeah, take that, Ross.
I mean, maybe bargaining chip's the wrong way to call it. I just don't think they're sold on Hilton like the fantasy community are. I think Hilton gets overblown. Like, you can look at my rankings. I've got him lower than most people on staff, if not the lowest. I never get Hilton in any leagues just because he's not a guy for me. In fact, when I loaded in my rankings to this website, I spelled T-Y Hilton as high, so it didn't load. It said, didn't find this player, and I thought to myself, not a problem. I was never going to draft him anyway.
Ross, if Ross is low on a guy, he just doesn't even put them in his rankings.
There you go.
Yeah, to a degree, I think that's true. I mean, you put them so low, you're not going to ever draft them. But if you have an opinion on someone, high or low, I think you have to stick with it. I mean, why draft someone in the fourth round because he's value if you think he isn't going to be a fourth round player for you?
Speechless.
Silence. Yeah. Maybe my next facts will create more debate.
That's what happens when you try and do two things at once for 14 rounds here or whatever it's been. But if you are still listening to this show, thank you for hanging on for this long. But this is the thick of things, the last round before we start picking kickers. Happy to report no kickers have been picked yet. Of course, Ross is on the clock right now. So it could happen, but
Greg, go look.
I don't want Greg to
that's an interesting pick. Robert Griffin III in the 14th round. It's obviously a high ceiling pick.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm the last guy to pick a quarterback. I've got Kaepernick. I'm looking at the board, so Winston, Mariota, Carr, Bortles, Foles, Dalton, Carson Palmer, maybe. We've talked about the upside and his being underrated. Alex Smith, boring but consistent. I mean, like I joked about Garoppolo. To me, it's an easy pick there of the quarterbacks left. Griffin the third, massive upside.
I think I would have went Mariota, but I have Griffin right there. I think that's a fine pick.
Very interesting. Our first defense does go off the board in the 14th round. I mean, I'm not a fan of taking defenses outside of the 15th round, but it's the very end of the 14th. And if you want the Seahawks, well, you're not getting them in the 14th round in your redraft leagues, but they are going to be the first team off the board. They weren't the number one scoring fantasy defense in pretty much most all formats last year, but obviously the floor is so significantly high with the Seahawks that you know what you're getting there on a week-to-week basis, and you don't have to play the streaming game at team defense.
Yeah, but aren't they? And maybe you just said this. I was picking, but what was Seattle? Number 23 scoring defense last year.
Not at the end. Not by the end of the season. They started to rattle off points by the end of the season.
That's ESPN scoring. ESPN scoring. They were number 22. Kind of hard to believe.
I have them at number 3.
Okay. They have 22. I'm showing them 22. Well, that's ESPN scoring. We're not using ESPN scoring.
Well, I'm in ESPN standard scoring. Number 3 overall. I don't know.
Let's figure out. Well, I'm looking at this too. I don't know what I'm looking at, but one of us is wrong.
I hope it's not me, considering I wrote up the team defenses for ESPN's magazine. But, whoops!
Jeff, you're on the clock as well, by the way. You got 7 minutes.
Oh yeah, I got a pick in.
Ooh, Nick too. I like it.
And I'm going to go with my team defense. You know, we got basically the team defenses here and the kickers. We're not going to bore the listening audience here with the rest of that. So I think we'll wrap things up. But you know what? This actually probably went better than our last try. So we'll do the same thing again when we get back in June for our next staff mock draft. If you're listening, you enjoyed it. You have questions, comments, etc. about this, we can certainly work some stuff in. Hit us all up on Twitter. The people who are left, well, I don't know if I memorized all of your Twitter handles, so why don't we go one at a time. Joey, Twitter.
PFF_Joey.
And Mike.
Mike me.
Mike you.
Mike Clay, NFL.
Nate.
PFF_Nate Yankee, that's NATEJAHNKE.
Pat Thorman.
At Pat_Thorman. Thorman. Ricky
Gervais.
You can catch me on Twitter at RossMilesNFL any day of the week.
And I'm at Jeff Ratcliffe. Don't forget you can follow the site at PFF_fantasy, and PFF Radio, of course, is at PFF Radio for all of our shows. Make sure that you're stopping by the site. Make sure you're checking out the draft guide, going to be released this week. Get subscriptions, folks. Help us out. You like what we do? This is how we support it. Listen to us, iTunes, Stitcher, Log Talk Radio. Watch us on YouTube. Watch us on the Fantasy Sports Network. And just keep interacting with us on Twitter. So thanks for listening, folks. That's going to do it for us. So for Pro Football Focus, for the crew, I'm Jeff. That's a wrap.